The Hebrew word chokhmah, or wisdom, is not just a word to refer to intellectual capacity. In fact, the word chokhmah often refers to skills or talents. In some contexts, it's used for blacksmiths, for craftsmen, for people with artistic ability. So in the Hebrew mind, the word wisdom is not just gaining knowledge or gaining intelligence. It is gaining skills to live. It is the ability to live well. That, in fact, is wisdom. Now, wisdom literature is part of the writings of the Hebrew canon. Remember our three sections: Torah, Nevi'im, Ketubim, law, prophets, and writings. It's in the writings section. It's a little bit of different genre. It is not direct revelation from Yahweh like you find in the Torah or even in the prophets, where thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, quotation marks, what the Lord, the God of Israel has said. Rather, in wisdom literature, I often like to call it indirect revelation. There was a belief that God created the world according to certain principles and certain reasonable laws, and that one might be able to infer those laws by observing the world. So you could know something of the will of God by looking around and see how the world works. So sometimes wisdom literature is actually located within creation theology, because you are observing creation and trying to infer from that creation what God would have people to do. Obviously, looking at the world and trying to infer wisdom from it is not, indigenous to Israel. Ancient Near Eastern traditions all around, cultures all around, had wisdom traditions. And Israel's sages never hesitated to borrow from traditions around them. Obviously, observing the world and gaining insights is not something that Israel felt they did all by themselves. Now, whenever a sage borrowed a theological tradition, it always fixed the material theologically. So if you're borrowing an Egyptian document, you take out the references to Egyptian gods and you put in Yahweh. This particular happens in Proverbs chapter 22 through Proverbs chapter 24. That section has sections which strongly parallel a wisdom teaching in Egypt known as the instruction of Amenemope. Now, the instruction of Amenemope is the same kind of wisdom that we find in Proverbs. It's observing life and not being angry, and don't mistreat the widow, and take care of the poor, and don't have angry friends, and all those sorts of normal, what you would infer as wise things to do, and Proverbs picks up on that in its use of it. Of course, always fixing it to focus on Yahweh. Now, there's two kinds of wisdom in this world. There is practical wisdom, which is the kind of wisdom you think of when I first say wisdom. The book of Proverbs is practical wisdom, that pithy, bumper sticker kind of ethics or instruction that you get, the Benjamin Franklin-esque kind of early to bed, early to rise, penny saved is a penny earned kind of practical wisdom that probably is what most of you think about. The book of Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus, is an apocryphal book that is also practical wisdom. So if you're Catholic, that is also in your canon, and also practical wisdom. The other kind of wisdom, in opposed to practical wisdom, is skeptical wisdom or philosophical wisdom. These are wisdom books that you probably didn't think of as wisdom when you first saw them. The book of Job is skeptical or philosophical. The book of Ecclesiastes, or Kohelet, as it's known in Hebrew, is skeptical wisdom or philosophical wisdom. In some ways, that wisdom is looking at the world and offering a counterpoint, counter testimony to what Proverbs is offering. Very often, Proverbs makes the point that hard work brings success and diligence will bring you victory. And Ecclesiastes and Job come along and say, I know some hardworking folks that's not true, and sometimes the rain falls on the unjust. So in some ways, we have that James Sanders, the canon of self-correcting, coming back into it again, that we have the practical and the skeptical, all of it in the canon at the same time. Now, remember when I say practical wisdom, in the case of Proverbs, it is still talking about indirect revelation. You don't get thus says the Lord in Proverbs, and you don't get thus says the Lord in Job or Ecclesiastes when it comes to revealing those kinds of divine truths. And as a result, because it's a different genre, you've got to be careful how you interpret this. If you start interpreting wisdom documents as Torah, you're going to run into difficulty. Torah, of course, Moses gets that directly from God, right? God speaks it to Moses. Moses gives it to Israel. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt, that comes directly from the mouth of God. Practical wisdom, though, is a little bit different. It's wisdom that's observed from looking around the world. And so you can have, well, some rather confusing texts. One of my favorite comes from Proverbs chapter 26. Proverbs chapter 26, verse 4 says, "Do not answer fools according to their folly, or you will be a fool yourself." That's good advice, right? You don't let stupid people pull you into an argument. This is kind of like the old Mark Twain line. Don't get in a fight with a stupid person. They'll pull you down to their level and beat you with experience. That is the essence of Proverbs 26:4. But if you keep reading the Bible, after Proverbs 26:4 comes Proverbs 26:5, which says, "Answer fools according to their folly, or they will be wise in their own eyes." In other words, don't let stupid people get off the hook. Sometimes you got to call them out. You've got to let the world know that they're stupid, and you got to confront them with it. 26:4, don't answer fools. 26:5, answer fools. Well, what are we supposed to do? Do we answer them or do we not answer them? Well, this kind of a contradiction is not surprising when you remember the genre we're dealing with here. This is experiential. This is indirect revelation. This is not Torah. So you don't have that kind of thus says the Lord. You know what? Sometimes you need to answer fools according to their folly. Sometimes stupid people need to be called out and told they're stupid. And you know what? Sometimes you just leave it alone. Sometimes you don't do it. We have that same sort of thing in our own proverbial tradition, right? You hear, "He who hesitates is lost," and then you also hear, "Look before you leap." Well, the real wisdom is knowing when to be one and when to do the other, when to apply these sort of teachings. And I think that's sort of where the text comes for us as well. When do you answer a fool? When do you not answer a fool? Well, that's when we truly understand wisdom.